Okay, we're back. So it's important to understand some of the stuff that went on now. He found himself, and O'Neill was no stranger to politics, but, and thank goodness, I'm probably, Maguire wouldn't have been either. Tyrconnell O'Neill probably would be a neophyte. But anyway, so I want to see about the part where...
They left when they were at dinner. When did they move on? Because they went to inn.
They did, but a little in between, if I can find a wee bit here. Spanish government had just signed peace terms with the Dutch, for long close allies of England. So this is how it gets complicated. Now the Dutch were, as you know, on the north end of these colonies, Belgium and then Flanders. King Philip rapidly concluded that the continued presence of the Earls in Spanish Flanders could imperil that peace. Teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, Spain could not risk another war with England. The exiled Irish nobles had become an embarrassment. Far from acceding to their request to be allowed to return to Ireland with the Spanish army to root out the heretics, Philip could not even risk giving them permission to come to Spain. So we're discovering a lot of things now that maybe didn't fully come out before. And so it was decided to transfer their earls and their families to Italy under the protection of the Pope. The King's ambassador in Brussels, the Marquis de Guadalest, was appalled when he heard of the decision on December the 4th, 1607. And he wrote to Philip, "I do not know how the Earls will take this, and I confess to your Majesty that it seems to me His Highness has taken a harsh decision in this matter with regard to people who have given such service to God and your Majesty." So it was that the flight of Earls from Ulster had been for nothing. It was vain that O'Neill and O'Donnell sent an appeal to King Philip on December the 17th, 1607. This is a big long appeal that they wrote here, but you know, it was in vain. His Serene Highness orders that we leave his states so that he may keep his promise made to England. This has caused us much sorrow and astonishment. As God is our witness, we would rather have chosen to die in our country than to see ourselves treated in this manner by a prince in whom we placed our greatest trust. Our concern is the pleasure and satisfaction it will give the heretics to see us thus treated. Heretics being, of course, the English. Now that was very sad. That was written by O'Neill. So, King Philip of Spain had earlier granted permission for the establishment of an Irish Franciscan college at Louvain, one of my favourite parts, which continues to this day. This was at the request of a member of the Spanish Council of State who had been named Protector of the Irish, more particular its emigres. Don Francisco Arias de Vila has an aide, the Reverend Florence Connery, a Roscommon man, no doubt, an Irish Franciscan whom Christopher St. Lawrence, the little kid that Granuela played one side against the other, had accused of getting money from the Spanish monarchs to cause trouble for the English in Ireland. From Louvain, the Earls wrote to the King of Spain asking for funds for the Irish College of Duois. Arrangements were made for the smallest children to stay in Flanders with nurses, tutors and servants. They included Tyrconnell's infant son Hugh and O'Neill's sons John and Brian, both under 10 years old. They don't talk much about their sojourn in Louvain, but my understanding is they spent the winter there.
That's what it said on the map.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. So they kind of gloss over this a little bit. So on the 28th of February 1608, the Earls and their party, 30 of them on horseback and the women following in a coach, set out from Louvain for Italy. As they passed through Lorraine, the ruling Duke Charles gave them a hospital reception at Nancy. So warm indeed that James I refused to send a representative to his funeral when he died shortly afterwards. That story is pretty well known. The Irish then pressed on through Colmar, Bâle and Lucerne. Then, as they set out to cross the mountains, they lost most of their money, as O'Kennan tells us. And that was very tragic. This is his report. The next day, St. Patrick's Day precisely, the 17th of March, they went to another smaller town named Sillenan. From that they advanced through the Alps. Now the mountains were laden and filled with snow and ice, and the roads and paths were narrow and rugged. They reached a high bridge in a very deep glen called the Devil's Bridge. One of O'Neill's horses, which was carrying some of his money, about £120, which was a fortune, that would be an enormous amount of money back then, fell down in the face of the high frozen snowy cliff which was in front of the bridge. Great labour was experienced in bringing up the horse alone, but the money decided to remain blocking the violent, deep, destructive torrent which flows under the bridge through the middle of the glen. You know, the sense of humour there among it all. The money decided to stay down there. After spending a full day in a futile attempt to retrieve the money, they continued through St. Gothard Pass on to Lugano. They reached the shores of Lake Como on March 22nd and then descended to the city of Milan. There, the Earls were received very cordially by the governor, Pedro Enriquez de Acevedo, Conde de Fuentes. He sent this report to King Philip on the 30th of April 1608. So Philip was still kind of telling his people to be nice to them in various places, but at the same time couldn't afford to get back into a fight with the British. So the British had that power all the time. It's just so sad. The Earls of Tyrone and Tyrconnell arrived here before Holy Week, and in accordance with your Majesty's orders, I feasted them and treated them with care in as discreet and secret a manner as possible. That tells you everything right there. You know? So here was King Philip having to say, you know, be nice to them, but, you know, move them on. In order both to assure them of the generosity and compassion of your Majesty, I felt the greatest pity for them. One of them brings a sister of marriageable age, and another a wife and a son. They bring also many persons who would not be parted from them. They arrived in great distress from the hardships of the journey, and in such need that it was necessary to pay their hostilities and to give them money for the journey. So all their money had gone down the what a time. But Milan was then a Spanish possession, and the Irish could not be allowed to stay. In Spain, the English ambassador, Sir Charles Cornwallis, you know, the old guard, the old high-hatted Charlies, protested at their presence in the city. Having lately gathered among the Irish here that the fugitive Earls had been in Milan, and there much feasted by the Conde de Fuentes, I expostulated it with the Secretary of State, who answered that they had not yet had any understanding of their being there. So the French or the Spanish authorities said, well, we don't know. But the English knew. Philip's minister was not telling Cornwallis the truth, but Fuentes had no choice but to send the Earls on their way. Just before their arrival in Rome on the 29th of April, the Spanish ambassador in Rome, the Marquis de Antona, had an interview with Pope Pius X, as he informed Philip III. I have represented to His Holiness on behalf and in the name of your Majesty, how fitting and proper it would be that His Holiness protect and help those who, for the Catholic faith and in defence of our holy religion, have lost their possessions and country and everything they owned. I also told His Holiness that the Earl's presence here may act as a deterrent against the persecution of the Catholics in England. Now obviously they were kind of pulling a little fast one there. I don't see how that one kind of stacks up. But I guess the Spanish were trying hard to persuade the Pope, trying to give him good reasons to take care of the Irish, which again tells you a lot that the Pope was not exactly waiting for them with open arms either. Pardon?
Wasn't he in league with England?
Well, they always were, because again, as I said to you earlier, the popes and they always stood up for what they considered to be the legal kings, you see. So they wouldn't have had much time for these prehistoric, oldest monarchies in Europe that didn't get their legitimacy from the Holy See.